Homeland Security. As we speak, though, no vote yet. What did Colorado's two Democratic senators want out of this deal, and did they get any of it?
So, Ryan, Colorado senators want what most Democrats
need to be clearly identified. There can be no accountability without transparency.
and no roving patrols, and the use of judicial warrants, not administrative. And by only doing 2 weeks of funding for Homeland Security, they have time to negotiate these issues and get reforms into law.
Okay, so they are trying to buy themselves some time with a more temporary approach to that aspect of the funding. What about Senator Michael Bennet, who I will note is also running to be governor?
Well, Bennett wants to go a bit further than the deal proposes.
He had a pretty good speech the other day.
And he also talked about that on the Senate floor Thursday. You know, not arresting people in sensitive places like schools, hospitals, and churches, not taking kids from their families, and penalties when officers violate the Constitution. But the big step he's seeking, and that most Republicans will not support, an overhaul of DHS leadership. Bennett pointed to how Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem described Alex Preddy and Renee Good. Those are the two U.S. citizens shot and killed in Minneapolis by federal immigration agents, and the circumstances of how they were shot, which, you know, video contradicted.
President Trump would be doing himself and the country a favor if he removed Kristi Noem from her position and prevented her from doing any more harm to this country and to our communities.
Now, Bennett says he won't vote for the deal.
As we mentioned, representatives are in recess, and the Senate still hasn't voted on this. As I understand it, Caitlin, funding for about 75% of the federal government runs out after midnight. So what happens?
So we're going to have a short partial shutdown until both chambers pass the deal and the president signs it into law. In the Senate, you know, unless all 100 senators agree, any one senator can hold up the process. And there's at least one Republican who has publicly said he's seeking his own changes. And also the House is not due back until Monday. So if all goes well, the shutdown really impacts the weekend and Monday, you know, a funding lapse, let's call it. But the House has its own challenges, and namely Speaker Johnson's very slim majority. And there are some on the far right who will want their own changes, like citizenship verification to vote or defunding sanctuary cities.
The government, of course, was fully shut down for more than a month last year. Any number of federal workers went without paychecks. What is a short-term partial shutdown look like?
Well, Ryan, it's partial because 6 of the 12 government funding bills are already law. Now, aside from Homeland Security, the 5 remaining impacted by this funding lapse are defense, labor and health and human services, transportation and housing and urban development, the State Department, financial services, think the Treasury Department, and government services, think the executive branch and independent agencies. Now, like I said, the House and the Senate have to pass the same thing.
Is there as well for Colorado for water negotiations?
Yeah, that's right, Ryan. You know, this meeting was Interior Secretary Doug Burgum. It's one way they're hoping to break the impasse over states share water from the Colorado River. You know, there's this February 14th deadline set by them to reach a deal. Now, in a statement, Governor Jared Polis says he's fighting for Colorado water users and is committed to finding an agreement that reflects, quote, real-world supplies and shares responsibility across all 7 basin states. As you know, Ryan, Colorado hasn't had a lot of snow this season, and we're looking at the strong possibility of drought. Now, if negotiations don't work out, this most likely heads to court. The 7 basin states have been trying for 2 years to renegotiate the compact, but whether getting governors involved produces an agreement, you know, I think is very much up in the air.
Or in the water, as it were. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you, Ryan.
CBR's Washington correspondent, Caitlin King. 40 years ago this week, the shuttle Challenger exploded. Here's CNN from just before liftoff.
So the 25th Space Shuttle mission is now on the way after more delays than NASA cares to count. This morning it looked as though they were not going to be able to get off.
Then 73 seconds after ignition, a problem.
Looks like a couple of the solid rocket boosters blew away from the side of the shuttle in an explosion.
The public watched as it disintegrated.
You saw it just a few moments ago, a huge fireball in the sky.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded.
7 astronauts died, including teacher Krista McAuliffe. David Klaus worked at NASA at the time. He's now Professor Emeritus of Aerospace Engineering at CU Boulder. And he spoke with CPR's Andrea Dukakis.
We all took off school to watch
We
it.
spoke with you a decade ago for the 30th anniversary, and I want to get a reminder about what happened and then look at how space exploration has evolved in the last decade. Where were you when the Challenger exploded?
So in 1985, I started my professional career as a shuttle launch control engineer at the Kennedy Space Center. But I was in a unique position. I was hired to be on a launch team that was going to start sending the shuttle into space from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. So during that year, when I was in training for the Vandenberg launch, which was scheduled for 1986 later in the year, I was back and forth between Florida and California quite often. And during the week, during the actual launch date for Challenger, I happened to be out in California. I was sitting on the launch console out there, but only as a passive observer. We weren't actually doing anything, but I was watching it unfold in real time as the morning went on there.
How soon after liftoff did you realize something was wrong?
So as you know, it was, I believe, 73 seconds into the launch that the vehicle exploded. And up until that point, everything just looked normal, like every other launch I'd seen that year, the year prior. And right then, when the plume started going in different directions, everyone kind of did a double take, realized something was wrong. You know, it wasn't immediately apparent what had happened. I know myself, I kept expecting to see the shuttle come out of the plume, you know, come back for a landing. Of course, that wasn't the case. The vehicle was destroyed by the escaping gas from the solid rocket booster O-rings, as we now know, and the crew was lost at that point. So it was, you know, you see something like that, and you're just in disbelief. It takes a little bit for that to register because it's so strange looking, you know, and when you see something occur like that, it takes a little bit of time to sink in.
As an aerospace engineer, was it anything you had imagined would happen during your career that you would see something like this? Is this something aerospace engineers think about before launches?
You don't necessarily dwell on it, but you certainly think about the risks and potential failures because that's part of the process to try to think through all the things that can go wrong and then try to design